Today, the federal government has begun settlement discussions with abuse victims of a billionaire by the name of Jeffrey Epstein. Now, some of you might have already heard about him, but he was implicated in a case involving minors, underage sex, and prostitution solicitation. Now, he was actually convicted of soliciting an underage individual for prostitution back in 2015. And the way this case played out was shady, to say the least. It turns out that he was not prosecuted on a federal level. He was able to strike a sweetheart deal. And even though there was evidence indicating that he had child pornography in his home and that he had many different situations involving underage girls, he was only prosecuted and convicted of soliciting one minor for prostitution.
And that was back in 2007, by the way.
Yeah. The case happened in 2005, but he was convicted in 2007.
Yes.
All right, so in 2007, the feds entered into a secret non-prosecution agreement with the billionaire, which ensured that Epstein and his co-conspirators would not be prosecuted federally in exchange for his guilty plea to state charges. Epstein's only served 13 months in a Florida prison and home detention for solicitation and procurement of minors for prostitution. Now, by the way, he was sentenced to 18 months, but he only served 13 months. So even that, small sentence that he got was lessened to 13 months, which really upsets me.
Well, probably for, behaving in prison, time served for, but he didn't have access to underage prostitutes in prison, so it's a little easier to make sure he doesn't violate that.
Right.
I assume he also did not cause a ruckus in whatever probably cushy prison that he was in. Okay, wow. So you let him off 5 months. But to me, the much bigger issue is that, and to the victims, by the way, more importantly, the bigger issue is that the feds decided not to pursue the charges at all. Did it have to do with the fact that he had a dream team of lawyers who aggressively went after the prosecution, and maybe connected to a lot of really, really powerful and influential people, including Bill Clinton? It's hard to tell, but that's why they're suing, to find out.
I mean, this story is horrendous once you get into the details. And you might wonder, Anna, why'd you start that story with talks about the federal government starting settlement talks with these victims? Well, it's because the federal government did do something shady here in striking the sweetheart deal. Now, when you make this type of deal with the criminal at hand, you have to make sure you disclose as much information about that deal with the victims, right? You have to be as transparent as possible, and they were not transparent. So attorneys for the victims in this case contend their clients' rights were violated when the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of Florida failed to notify them in a timely manner of this non-prosecution agreement. Also, former President Bill Clinton took at least 26 trips aboard his private jet, which has been nicknamed the Lolita Express, even leaving behind his Secret Service agents on several occasions. Now, I mention that because it shows you how well connected Epstein is. And there is some indication in court filings, some reports indicating that Epstein had hidden cameras throughout his home. And what he would do is he would film politicians and celebrities, big name individuals, having sexual, relations with minors, and then he would use that as blackmail against them. So I'm not saying any statement indicating that Bill Clinton was involved in any of that is speculation, and I want to be absolutely clear about that. But did he have dirt on politicians that were involved in this scandalous behavior, illegal behavior? Absolutely.
Well, there's reports that there's videotape of that, but we don't know who he's got videotape
We don't know who.
So let's just be super clear about that. Now, let's talk about judgment here and why he got a relatively light sentence. First of all, he's a billionaire. So he's got a dream team of lawyers that Anna's going to tell you about in a second. So when you're a billionaire, you get a lot of breaks, okay? You get a break because your defense team is so much better than an average guy's defense team, right? Mm-hmm. Secondly, a lot of the people that are in power, I think unconsciously relate to you. I don't mean as the guys, going after child prostitutes and child porn and all that stuff. But there's a feeling of like, does this guy really belong in jail? Mm-hmm. I mean, he's a billionaire, right? Like when a normal thug walks in, yeah, I see him belonging in jail for a long, long time. right? But this guy, I mean, he's connected to all these politicians. We don't know if they're covering up for him. I'm saying that at a minimum, even if they're not covering up for him, these are the advantages he gets, some conscious, some unconscious,
Yeah.
right? Now, the speculation part is, well, then there might have been powerful people who were looking out for him, and that would be a big deal. And then, you know, did the prosecutors get scared of his lawyers for some of the things that his lawyers did? So that, I think that's a very interesting part of the story.
Yep.
And so there's some, you know, real evidence on that, and we should get into that as well.
Yeah, so let's get into that right now. According to reports, so not only do prosecutors negotiate a carefully worded non-prosecution agreement with his attorneys, they apparently don't even notify dozens of his alleged victims until after the deal has been signed. So we talked about that a little bit. When the feds did send out notifications in 2008, documents reveal the FBI made it appear as if the investigation was still ongoing, even though they knew full well that a deal had been reached with Epstein to end the investigation. So that shows you how the prosecutors kind of worked you know, with the defense attorneys to kind of strike this deal, and they kind of hid it. They hid the fact that they were doing this deal, and they tried to make it seem to the abused victims that, hey, no, this investigation is ongoing. Now, who are Epstein's attorneys? They're big names: Alan Dershowitz, Kenneth Starr, Roy Black. I don't know who Jay Lefkowitz is, but he's a big
relatively famous attorney as well.
Yeah.
But let's note the irony of Ken Starr being on that list. Ken Starr is the guy who went after Bill Clinton for his sexual problems, right? Oh, did you sleep with that young woman? But then he turns around and defends a guy who got convicted for sleeping with underage minors.
I know, but he's a defense attorney, and although I'm sure there are some defense attorneys out there who have, you know, moral and ethical issues of doing something like that, I think the majority of defense attorneys are just doing their job.
No, I don't believe that at all. Here, let me
Really?
explain. So this is the same argument I got in with Johnny Cochran in the very first TV appearance I ever made, right? So yes, if you're a court-appointed lawyer, then bless your heart, you got to defend whoever you got to defend. That's our justice system, and I'm 100% with you. These guys are not a court-appointed. They're getting paid a ton of money to do this.
Of course they are.
So no, my point is Ken Starr didn't have to defend this child molester, okay? He chose to do it for a ton of money. So he goes and tells Bill Clinton, how dare you do that? That is inappropriate with a person who's totally above age, totally agreed to do it. Now, there are other issues in that case of Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton, but oh my God, you should be impeached, and I'm going to investigate you to the end of the earth. Oh, your buddy over here, meanwhile, actually had sex with underage women. Well, I'm going to go defend him because I'm getting paid a lot of money. That's my morals and principles.
No. Look, understand what I'm saying. Do I think he had to do it? No, of course he didn't have to do it. I'm just trying to make a point about how when it comes to big-name defense attorneys like that are probably making millions of dollars, if they have a chance to make more money, they're going to take that chance. And that's exactly what he did here.
Paid.
Exactly. So let me give you more information about this guy, because the more digging I did, the more disgusted I was with how easily he got off. Now, understand, he did serve 13 months in prison in Florida, and he is a registered sex offender in the state of Florida. However, the reason why he got caught is because back in 2005, a woman had notified police that her 14-year-old daughter was taken to his mansion and was given $300 to undress. Allegedly, she kept her underwear on and then massaged him. And you know what massage means. And that's the reason why an investigation began. And through that investigation, they were able to find the hidden cameras and all that other stuff. But then they also found, you know, images of underage girls in his home. They found that there were like numerous cases of underage girls that were being solicited for prostitution. They also found that he had this referral program where he would have the young girls refer more of their friends, more young girls, to get paid to have sexual acts with him. It's just disgusting. Like, the more you read about it, the more you find out what he's really about and how easily he got off. You find out that we don't really have a justice system. We have that two-tier justice system where insanely wealthy, connected people like him get off, and then, you know, poor people who get caught with possession of marijuana spend a ridiculous amount of time behind bars.
So let me make it obvious to you guys, and you know this. If you're an average guy and you did any of this and you're middle class, first of all, you shouldn't do it either. Okay, it's terrible. But if you did it, you'd be going away for a long, long time. The feds wouldn't be looking to make sure that they do a non-prosecution agreement with you. Isn't that unbelievable?
Yeah.
A non-prosecution agreement. My guess is they would do a pro-prosecution agreement and make sure they throw the book at you. But hey, you couldn't hire the best attorneys in the world for millions upon millions of dollars because you're not a billionaire. So you're going to get a different justice system than this guy gets, right? So we all know that. And then on top of that, his defense counsel did even things that to me, I'm sickened that the prosecution seems to have wilted under. According to former U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta, he said defense counsel investigated individual prosecutors and their families looking for personal peccadillos that might provide a basis for disqualification.
Yep.
So in other words, the defense attorney said, we're coming after the prosecutors personally. We're going to try to dig up dirt on you. I feel like if I was a prosecutor and they did that to me, I'd come 10 times harder. I'd be like, oh, you want to play around with the federal government? Oh, you want to do an investigation on me? Well, I got hundreds of prosecutors here. Let's get it on, okay? Let's have at it, Hoss. But what do? Oh my God, he's a billionaire. Oh no, he's threatening us. He's threatening you. What kind of a federal prosecutor are you? But instead they back down. See, this is why everybody hates the system. Like, and the establishment was like, whoa, what's the big deal? The big deal is we're tired of the two-tier justice system. We're tired that there's no justice I mean, a guy who'll smoke pot and get a lot more prison time than he got for doing all these things with underage girls, right? Because he's got the defense attorneys to threaten prosecutors. And look, and I want to be clear about his connections to the powerful, including Clinton. So we don't, Lolita Express was the nickname of the plane.
Yep.
He didn't put that on the plane. That would have been a little bit more.
That would be pretty brazen.
I mean, Clinton didn't walk into a plane called the Lolita Express, okay? It's a nickname. I don't know how long that nickname's been around, etc. And maybe Clinton, in all those times he was on the plane and hanging out with Epstein, never did anything wrong. But he did go on the plane 26 times, okay? So that is, on the private jet of Epstein, that is really bad judgment for what we found out about him. Again, maybe it's totally unfair and Clinton didn't know any of it and it was all at a time period where he couldn't have possibly known what Epstein was up to. But apparently a lot of people knew what Epstein was up to,
yeah.
Right? And there's Bubba going on that plane. Oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? So now, don't hold anything against him yet because there's nothing proven against him. But we already know the outrage in this case is what Epstein was able to get away with because he had more power, he had more influence, and probably most importantly, he had more money.